Panama a year earlier when Stead introduced the stink bug to the world. You were lucky enough to lead this strike package from Tonopah, Nevada. Can you describe this unique story as well as share any of the valuable lessons that you gained from this to carry forward to the opening night of Desert Storm?
This is a very long story.
That's a good one.
But I'll shorten up pieces of it. We did fly out of Tonopah. It was the longest combat sortie I've ever flown. The problem with it was a couple things. Once we got down to the Florida coast, the weather got really bad. Actually, so the 117, both during Just Cause and Desert Storm, did not have GPS. So we had to be able to see things on the ground to update our INSs because they would drift, as all INSs did back then. And the last update I got on Just Cause was over Tinker Air Force Base on their TACAN. So I had to fly all the way to Panama without an update and trust the system. Once we got to Florida, we were on a KC-10, and only certain tankers were allowed to refuel us because of the training they needed to refuel the 117. And we had come out of the black world recently, and only a certain couple squadrons, one 135 squadron and one KC-10 squadron, were briefed on our program. This KC-10, the weather was so bad, he took us down below 3,000 feet. We did not have radar altimeters, so we had to trust the tanker that we weren't going to hit anything, and we had to refuel down there below 3,000 feet in nasty weather, which was pretty eye-opening because you're getting bounced around pretty bad. Once we got to the east side of Panama, there were 8 of us. We had 8 different targets. The plan here was to not kill Noriega. It was to capture him. So we had targets. The Panamanian Defense Force barracks were 2 of the targets. He had a beach house, which was a target, and he had a mountain house called Mountain House. And those were the 4 targets, 2 aircraft on each one. However, if they didn't know where Noriega was, we were not allowed to hit his houses. So what happened was they didn't know where he was, so the only targets were the barracks. And at the end of the mission, right before the mission started, special forces were in charge of this whole thing. Realized that nobody had flown or done any combat, Army, Navy, anybody. We did not stealth up the aircraft. The reason we were chosen was because we had that GBU-27. We had shown that special forces had come up to Nellis, gave me a target, gave me a TOT. They went to the range and sat on the ground and watched me hit that target, me and another guy, at an exact TOT. So they said, you guys are going because we can't afford collateral damage. And you have to be on time because 30 seconds after your bombs hit, the SEALs are jumping out of airplanes. And the Delta forces, all the special ops people. So we had to be on time. They decided endgame not to have us hit the barracks. They wanted us to hit the fields in front of the barracks to stun and disorient the Panamanian Defense Forces. Turns out they had a heads up anyway. Nobody was in the barracks. So we did what they said. Their plan was then to get them to give up and say, if you don't give up, we're going to start taking out, where you're living and where you're working. Whether that happened or not, I don't know. We hit the fields, we left. Nobody was supposed to know we were there. Somebody leaked it. Somebody then said, well, why'd you use 117s? You didn't need them there. And then somebody said they didn't even hit anything. They hit fields, even though that was our target. So there's more to the story. I don't want to harp on Just Cause because this is a Desert Storm event, but there's more to it, and it was very interesting. Thankfully, Desert Storm proved the value of stealth and that we put bombs where we aimed, and they went there.
Is there anything you learned during that experience, though, that you took forward to Desert Storm?
Yes, if you can be in charge, be in charge. And hopefully it'll be airmen, because airmen understand airmen. Okay. And that's kind of, again, what General Horner said.
Awesome. All right, so we'll fast forward 13 years after Desert Storm. You'd return to Southwest Asia and command the Air Force's largest air expeditionary wing. How would you describe the implications of Desert Storm, implications of air power in Desert Storm over a decade later?
So I did get some lessons learned out of Desert Storm. First off, how to fight with the coalition. So we had coalition forces at Al-Udeid, and so every time we flew, we coordinated what we were going to do. Now, realize during OIF, Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom, we weren't dropping weapons every sortie. We had air dominance over Iraq and Afghanistan, which meant that every bomb we dropped over there was analyzed by senior leaders. So we were getting back to Vietnam. We're getting back to ROE being set up by political people versus warfighters. And so whenever we dropped a weapon, they wanted to see the videotape. If there was any collateral damage, be it because Intel had the target wrong, or be it because the bomb didn't go exactly where it was supposed to, we were being scrutinized, the Air Force. And that's because they could. There was air dominance. You know, a soldier has not had a bomb drop on him from the air since Korea in 1953. You should have learned that this year. You know, air superiority and air dominance is what we do in the Air Force, besides dropping weapons. So because of that, because they had all this time to analyze things, the Air Force was being scrutinized. It started with Allied Force. If you remember, I can't believe we gave this video out, but on TV you saw a pilot getting ready to, or he actually had dropped a weapon on a bridge, and as it was timing out, because the time of flight was more than 30 seconds, a train came across the bridge, and a train was hit. Well, that pilot didn't know that train was coming. He couldn't see that in his HUD or his display, and I just don't think we should have put that out because it looks bad to the Air Force, yet it was part of a mistake of war. I mean, it just happened. So I think under this new administration, the ROE has loosened up again over there, because you have to delegate and let the mission commanders and the pilots do their job. And if you hand tie them, it's not going to work. The only time we were allowed to drop quickly was during we called it a tick, troops in contact. If a quick reaction force in Iraq was being threatened or being shot at, they obviously wanted us to come in and help and take out the threat. So then we had a quicker response. But normally it could take up to 30 minutes to get permission to drop a bomb. That, as we pivot to the Pacific, that can't happen. You know, you have to rely on the pilots to do their job, and the WISOs and whoever else.
Okay. So I'll transition to your leadership experiences before we hand it over to the audience. So leadership development was an important emphasis this year for Gathering of Eagle students. So for this transition, you'd go on to command at many levels. You would eventually command the 9th Fighter Squadron, so you go back to 117, and then you would just continue to progress up there until your retirement. We've got a lot of students in the audience that are going to be taking command of a squadron in the very near future. What advice can you share with them about how they might be able to overcome the challenges that they're likely to face while they're in command?
So, you heard a little bit of this earlier, but be yourselves. You've all gotten where you are because of your personalities and the way you do leadership. And so don't change because you think you need to change. Just continue to do your job. Command is important to everyone. It's what we all strive for, and it doesn't matter what you're commanding. But once you get there, you have to rely on your people. And I always say one of the keys is trust. General Horner talked about delegation. You can't do it all. You'll fail because you'll be working 24-hour days, and you can't do that. So trust your people. Realize that everybody in the military, no matter what service, wants to do a good job. Nobody says, I'm going to do something stupid today. But mistakes are made. And if mistakes are made, you retrain them and you keep them. or you change their job if you have to. Crimes are a different story. Those you have to take care of. That will be your toughest job as a commander. The hardest thing I ever had to do was fire a squadron commander at Al-Udeid. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially over there, because somebody had to come in and replace him. And so trust your people, delegate, and make sure you have good people working for you that can sit in when you're not available.
Okay. Well, at this time, I'll hand the floor over to the audience if there's any questions. The floor is yours.
This is what General Horner went through. I think they got to put that video, that slide up that shows you how to go up to the mic and push the button. You know, when I was at ACSC, we didn't have that slide, so obviously we didn't know how to do it. And use your command voice.
Good morning, General.
Good morning.
Major Batterton, Flight 33. After the first night and throughout your remaining sorties in support of Desert Storm, did you see the mission of the F-117 evolve?
Well, our primary mission stayed the same. Our targets changed. Our techniques, tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, as you've heard them called, changed because we learned a lot of things. A lot of aircraft that were getting damaged over there, not F-117s, were getting damaged and hit over Baghdad. So after the first week or two, General Horner decreed nobody else is going to Baghdad at night anymore, except the 117s, which made us feel good, except again, like I said, we had to be below 10,000 feet over Baghdad, and that wasn't comfortable. But we did learn things. I talked about the software on the aircraft. I talked about the GBU-27 bunker buster. We carried 2, but at the time, the weapons bay doors had to open past the 90-degree point. So it had to go 135 degrees. So you can only drop one bomb, one GBU-27 at a time. So if we wanted to drop 2 on the same designated mean point of impact, a DIMPI, we have to reattack. And sometimes we had to drop 2 to get it to penetrate entirely and get into that bunker. So a reattack, we learned that the AAA would start, and at 8 minutes later, it would stop. And we didn't know why. It could have been they ran out of ammo. It could have been because they got tired. It could have been because their gun barrels got hot. We didn't care. We just knew it did. So when we reattacked, we would make sure and go out for more than 8 minutes, because then the AAA had stopped, and we could come back in, and it wouldn't start again until the bomb hit. So, and then one other thing. Originally, if our targets, we did not have a all-weather capability. So if the target was obscured by weather, we could not drop, because we never could drop without identifying the target, and that was the collateral damage issue. So if the weather was bad, they would say, find a bridge and take it out. Okay, that's easy. There were a lot of bridges in the Baghdad area, and so we could always find a bridge. Well, after about a week, General Deptula, or Lieutenant Colonel Deptula, called and said, stop taking out all the bridges, because after this is over, we're not going to be able to get anywhere, because you guys are taking out all the bridges. So our alternate targets became something else. So target set changed as the missions went along, but tactics, not much.
Jonas Roman, civilian. How do you think the use of the stealth bomber, such as the Nighthawk, was such a necessary component in the success in the Gulf War, and is stealth pivotal to the future wars?
Yes. Stealth fighter, to me, is more important than the stealth bomber, but I'm just kidding. So I think low observable technology is going to be around forever. My opinion, but it's also shared by a lot of others. F-117 with 1970s technology, B-2 with 1980s, F-22 1990s, and now we have the F-35, and they're all stealthy, okay? But more plays into that than just radar cross-section. There's other ways to defeat the threat, but I think the new bomber will have stealth characteristics. I'm not briefed into it. I'm not sure, but I would guess it would. I would guess that if the Navy could make the F-18 a low observable platform, they would, but they can't. So I think stealth is here to stay. As far as Desert Storm, the 117s flew 2% of the sorties and took out over 50% of the strategic targets. So obviously, we did what we were built for, and I think the American people got their money's worth with that platform.
Sir, Major Murado, thank you for sharing your story with us this morning. My question for you is based on those lessons learned that you shared with us during one of the earlier questions. Is there any different uses for the 117 you would have seen being used during Desert Storm?
No, because of the technology we had at the time. After Desert Storm, Secretary of the Air Force Donald Rice had 4 of us go to Nellis and talk to him and a few others about what we thought we would need for future combat. And there were several things. We wanted GPS, which they got later. We wanted an all-weather bomb, which turned into JDAM, and that's what started the whole JDAM program. We wanted to be able to talk on the radios while we were stealthed up. So we needed an LO conformal antenna so that we weren't, blind after we went into a combat environment. And we got that. So some of those things I had when I was at Holloman, some came on later. So technology did change. They improved the software so that the airplanes that flew in Allied force were able to drop that GBU-27 above 20,000 feet. They'll tell you it was still just as bad, and I'm sure it was, but being at 25,000 feet is a lot better than being at 8,000 feet when it comes to AAA. So they improved a lot of things, and that was helpful to the future engagements that the 117 had. But again, that was 70s technology. The infrared system, the target tracking systems were getting old. They didn't make the parts anymore, and it was cost prohibitive to rebuild those, and that's why they retired the F-117.
Sir, Major Beckenhauer, you talked about Operation Just Cause. What changes would you like to have seen if an airman had been in charge?
I don't want to badmouth too many things. Realize Just Cause was the first joint military operation in combat in a long, long time. So everybody wanted to participate, everybody wanted to be first, and everybody wanted to do the best and get their service highlighted in front of Congress and the American people. So I'm convinced that I told you right before I took off on that mission, I was told that the 3-star in charge, who was not an airman, decided he did not want us to hit those barracks because they wanted to use those barracks later on. For what? But I didn't care because I just wanted to go fly combat mission, as we all did. And so I think that was a political decision to highlight maybe the Air Force, but to show that we did a bad job. Because the story was never told by those in charge that we weren't supposed to hit the barracks, that we were supposed to hit the fields. Only the Air Force told that story. And we weren't allowed to tell it for a long time because the whole Just Cause was classified. And the only ones that could release it were not the Air Force. So there's still parts of that I can't talk about because it's never been released. But I think it was all politically motivated, but again, we just wanted to go do what we were training for, and so we did.
Hey, good morning, sir. Lieutenant Commander Matthews. Speaking about being highlighted as a service and then specifically as the F-117s, I noticed in the expertly crafted chapter in the GOE book.
Did you write it?
No, but somebody did.
Oh.
So, sir, I noticed there's a photo in there of you with the President George Bush. How did that affect the 117 community, and then kind of your hero status as a platform coming out of Desert Storm? What kind of effect did that have on the community after the war?
A major impact for the Air Force, because the F-117 was a success story. So post Desert Storm, it was not like post Vietnam. There were ceremonies in D.C. and throughout the country. There was a big parade on the Mall in Washington, D.C. Everybody was well accepted by the American public. Vietnam vets were there thanking us, like they owed us a thanks. We owed them the thanks. So it was a success story. I mean, the air campaign was a success. They also had this thing called Stealth Week at Andrews Air Force Base. And I brought the 117 in there. There was a B-2 in there. There was the version that had been decided on for the F-22. There was a stealth cruise missile. And it was a whole week. All the staff from Congress came, a lot of senators, a lot of congressmen, and the president came that one day. So he came and he wanted to sit up there. His one question to me was, because he had ejected out of an aircraft, he said, when you eject, does this canopy leave first? That was the only question. And that picture was taken, but it was also on CNN, and it shows him going like this. And everybody goes, what was he asking you? But the bottom line is, the goal there for the Air Force was to sell the B-2 to Congress, which worked, even though it was only 21 of them, and the F-22. So they were using the F-117 success for the